justifying the coup, but they don't want war. But now you can see that in spite all the other West African countries would meet, their military leaders would also lead. I mean, go for a meeting, series of meetings. But the Nigerian government saw it visibly from all groups that we don't want to war. And I think it's just an example of what she mentions about that. But then, in addition to that, when you talk about UCP, you still, I think, need to particularize some segments of the population, the people that need some priority. For instance, throughout these discussions, presentations, I'm afraid I didn't hear anything about like PLWDs, people living with disabilities, for instance. Perhaps somebody has mentioned about that, but I think these people, because what type of protection you are giving these people with special needs? How do you reach out to them? What do you offer to them that is special? Thank you.
Thank you. That was one of the questions I wanted to ask, but I realized we're running out of time. What have we kind of missed out on over the last 2 days, right? And that was one of my thoughts as well. Where are people with special needs? Where's the LGBTQ community, for example? So the different groups that might need particular protection, and to bring them into our thoughts and projects as well. I have Mahmoud. Is there anyone else who wants to say anything? Because I'd like to close the session so that we can have time for lunch. Anyone else who still have ideas? No? Then I give you the last one.
Prof, before you close, the cafeteria is ready for lunch at 12:30, so you have a few more minutes. Yes.
Thank you. No, I just noticed in a way how to see when we talk about sustainability in terms of UCPs. And for me, sometimes I found it difficult to understand the conflicts, why these communities are in conflict, and so on. I would love to see a space, a more space, that enable maybe national and international UCPs to join. And this will not come by snapping on a particular event that happened at a certain time. I give an example. For example, Palestine, when we snap only the 7th of October, of course we cannot see it with a complete image. So I would like to see more space that enable other UCPs on the national and internationals to intervene, to convince, because it seems that there is a kind of isolation. There is, and here is the space for that, without snapping on specific events and specific communities, I would say, without understanding the roots of why these communities in South Sudan are fighting. We don't want to take only the current situation. We want to dig back to the roots of this, so this will enable us to prevent violence.
It's quite interesting to see. So I'm not surprised that we don't have many spaces where there's a constant kind of meeting. Take the community of practice of unarmed civilian protection organizations, so organizations like Nonviolent Peace Force or like Peace Brigades International and so on, who have been doing this work since the 1980s, right? Only this year, for the very first time, they had the first international meeting of members of the community of practice to come together as a community, right, and to think about how can we work forward together and kind of raise awareness that this is happening. So we're not just one organization doing stuff here and another organization doing stuff there. And some communities were involved in this move to build that community and to build those conversation spaces, but I think it has to include many more kind of the communities doing the type of work and really kind of have that conversation as well. So one of the things we could do, for example, as the Network Plus is kind of connect people up with this initiative that is the Community of Practice to see what they're doing. So we don't duplicate work that's already been done, but we try to amplify it and get bigger. So that's a very good point. Okay, now that we have another 20 minutes, anyone has any more thoughts? Rosemary.
Thank you very much. Mine is more of a reflection. As Berit says, you've all got tired of hearing about the post-electoral violence in 2007 by now. We keep on saying it because it changed so many Kenyans' lives. The way it changed my life is I then wanted to know what role civilians can play when you have conflict in your community, when you are yourselves both the perpetuators and the victims of violence. Right? You can't point your finger at somebody because you've also done something else to somebody else, etc. So that's how I got into Nonviolent Peace Force. I always tell everybody I Googled. Google, how can I get involved in how civilians can protect each other? And they brought, do you mean Nonviolent Peace Force? I said yes. I clicked it. And that's how I got into announced civilian protection, just for you to understand sometimes the motivation. And because of getting into Nonviolent Peace Force, I got to understand about UCP. That's the methodology that was introduced to me as a potential. I was not surprised to hear that it's something I am familiar with. But what I'm surprised hasn't come out is my experience in the last 10, 13 years is you'll never know enough. Just now we're having a quick conversation of what do I understand by nonpartisanship? What does Luke understand? And we find that we kind of understand each other, but we have to talk about it. And when you're trying to work together, what does that mean? I think as a way forward is learning more what we are saying, so we are saying the right things. So when I say something, you hear what I'm saying rather than what you mean. I'm here because I'm still learning about UCP. And one of the things that's amazing about this network is doing the research. As Nonviolent Peace Force, we find it difficult, very difficult to fundraise, because when you say it's a community-based, yeah, Mama Halal, you're going to give $500,000 to Mama Halal to go and talk to some people, and then they'll get together and she'll talk to the women on the other religious group, whatever. The donors look at you, it's like, yeah, what are their safeguarding systems? What do they have in place to manage this money? What do they have in place to move things along? And UCP only works from grassroots. So I wanted to raise the importance of the work of doing research on UCP, to have concrete, specific evidence of when it works, why it works, when it doesn't work, what are the challenges. And this is absolutely fantastic, and that's why I've been happy to spend the 3 days. If we can prove it doesn't work in specific scenarios, that's a gain. If we can prove when it works best, that's a gain. One of the only research that we are doing this year, not there too, Nonviolent Peace Force, is some UCP programs that we started in 2012, 2013. By the way, Moses invited Nonviolent Peace Force to South Sudan. He got onto a bus with a letter of invitation and walked into Nairobi where there was a training going on and said, we are in trouble. Civilians need to participate in what's happening in South Sudan. And because of that letter, every work done by Nonviolent Peace Force is actually on his head. He's the one who brought us in. And this is civilian to civilian action, isn't it? But we need to reflect on that. Because I got to South Sudan last year, and I asked what happened to all those community groups that were here in 2012, 2013. The Americans stopped funding us in this area. The Dutch stopped funding us in this area. Does it continue? Did it work? Did it keep communities safe? And when you've been there for long enough, and it only works if you're there for long enough, the snapshot that he's talking about, you go to communities, ask them, are you safe? What do you think? They'll give you answers. But seeing 2, 3 years, 10 years down the So I would love to see a continuation of this so that when you go to communities and you do a research, you have engaged them. Mama Lal will now put UCP in everything she does. Are we making them safer or not? How can we support them? How can we move forward? And I know it's, and this is it, the donor funds don't come in when we really bring in the grassroots, but we need to reflect that it only works when grassroots are involved. So I'm really pleased that this is going on, and I really encourage Berit and her group to fundraise. I know it's been a headache for them. Maybe other people can join for that headache, but I have found when I've got a grant for Nonviolent Peace Force to be somewhere for a year, I will turn it down. Because what can you do in a year in a community when you're talking about behavior change, when you're talking about making an impact so fewer women go through sexually gender-based violence? You cannot do enough in a year. And yet you cannot convince people to give you money for 7 years or 8 years. All right. That's my personal reflection, sorry.
And I would say this network only started when I met Rosemary and the team together with Rachel in Myanmar. Rosemary was the director of NP in Myanmar, and they allowed us to meet some unarmed conflict monitors in Kachin State in Myanmar, and we talked to these people who volunteer to do amazing work on the ground to keep their community safe. And that was for me like, oh yeah, I want to work on this, I want to know more about this. So there's a circle here, Moses. You see? I think there was a hand, was there a hand here somewhere? You want to introduce yourself?
I think so, because I came a bit late. So my name is Radek Malinovski. I'm the founder and director of a project that deals with the challenge of human trafficking. So I'm more from the migration field that peace, but actually I see that we are more and more dragged into the issue of the peace, protection, and also justice. And I'll give you an example, and I think I wish to contribute a little bit because I missed that in today's discussion on yesterday. I think also we need to address the issues of how conflict, peace, climate change, those three things, they affect migration patterns. And because it is in the migration time that the levels of vulnerability, they grow, they skyrocket in fact. And often we are completely not prepared for that. I'll give you an example. Like when you work on the countering human trafficking, you always focus on two groups, children and women, yes, because even the international law speaks explicitly that it is about children and women. If you check the Palermo Protocol, it is about children and women. But in the context of the human trafficking caused by climate change and conflict in the pastoralist area, you find that those patterns, they change. Who gets trafficked in, let us say, northern Kenya because of climate change or because of conflict? Old people, okay? And are we ready to assist old people? No, we don't. Our programs, they are not created for elderly people. Our programs, they have no idea what to do with them besides giving direct protection. And I think that's a challenge because on one side we see the gap, on the other hand, we don't have enough discussion. I remember when we got those results from the research we did, we double-checked the statistics because before we made a mistake in statistics. Yeah? I mean, it doesn't make sense. And when I remember when I was presenting the results, you know, from this research, there was a strong voice from the civil society. We have to do research again because it doesn't make sense. But in fact, this is a challenge that we have, and I think it is not only about this particular case. Migration, in the context of conflict, war, climate change, changes. And there are new patterns of vulnerability that emerge, and I think we need to also pay attention to that, so we are more prepared to work with them at the grassroots level. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. Anyone else has any more thoughts?
Yes. Let me stand. They say when you stand, you vocalize better. Just to emphasize one thing and then to make an observation on another. One is, if you look at UCP and especially from a preventive perspective. I think we need to emphasize more on the issues of gender. There's some work we did in North Rift of Kenya, and we realized that women play a critical role in terms of preventing conflict. So even as partners we work, we need to bring them, especially at preventive level, do some analysis, because there we found out that the perpetrators of conflict were telling us if the women tie a rope around they don't tie a rope around their waist, or they don't do certain things, they will not go to war. And when they have gone to war, when they come back, they are the young girls, especially the young girls who sing songs of praise for them. There are also demands that come from women in terms of the number of cows they want for milk. So I'm just trying to emphasize the gender dimension of UCP, and especially incorporating women at the level of prevention. We need to do some work there to see how we ensure that the strategies that are being using at the community levels to prevent conflict, that we tap in them. Then lastly is the 3 days I've been hearing in most of the projects, people referring to victims. And I think it's something we need to think about. At which point do you become a victim, and at which point do you become a survivor? Do we still refer to people who have gone through troubles, now they are change agents? Do we still call them victims or survivors? So it's just a thought, how we use language when we are dealing with groups of people and communities. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We do actually have a video on our, there's a YouTube channel for Creating Safer Space. There's a video about all these practices that are being done by the women, so I'll send a link to that after the event. Who else was, yeah.
Thank you, I'm Hezbo Nawiti from Mekema University College. I wanted to share, if we take this further based on the recommendations out of this conference, to distinguish between the academic research that are meant to award students degrees and the project-based research, so that we come out with impactful policy issues so that the government can also influence government decisions. And then number 2, we transform the recommendation even after the roundtable discussion in the afternoon to a program, so that there is a clear distinction between a research-funded project and academic-based scholarly awarded degree research. Thank you.
Do we have anyone else who wanted? Yes, please. Yes, the microphone, otherwise come to you.
Contributors made, is it a question about victims? I just want to share an experience in Nigeria when we conducted a perception survey on on people's perception of what peace is, and then in a transitional justice context. Very interestingly, what came out is that every stakeholder in our community claimed to be a victim, including the almighty Nigerian military and the most vicious Boko Haram. So you see, we were left with a very, very wide scope of who to define who a victim is for us. Because the military told me, Mama, we are also victims of your people who know and align with the Boko Haram, allow them kill us without even alerting us. And the Boko Haram telling me, Mama, we are victims of the society's injustices. So when some people come with an alternative for us, to say this is a religion that preaches justice and can follow up on justice for us, what else do we have but to follow that? So you see, in context, everybody is very, very selfish, so it's left for us to now identify and then maybe redefine who actually should be a victim in a context like this, and then in spite of the community of victims, as survivors, as victims' relations, as people who are violated also stand on one side. Just a reflection, to share for your reflection. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I would like to finish by saying this session by saying, so I will summarize all of this, we will send it to you, we will stay in touch. But all of this, what you suggested, always requires work, right? And it requires volunteers. So we have a first volunteer to put into motion one of the suggestions from Nancy saying, could we continue meeting online on a regional basis? And Rosemary says Strathmore are very happy to coordinate that. So all the ideas always need somebody to take them forward, right? So if you feel like, yeah, I really want to do this, please put yourself forward, and we're very happy to hand the task over to you. But thank you, Rosemary, for already agreeing to do that.
I must say that at Strathmore, because we are service to the society, we are actually, this is what we'll be able to expand some of our policy and principle that even the VC talked about when you opened the meeting. But the fact that this conference has been able to broaden our understanding about UCP, brought out the alternative voices, but also looked into what academic can be able to do in order to strengthen the community involvement. That online is not only just meeting, but capacity building, and also how can this, can we do what we call short courses for the communities. You heard from Professor Maglid how we are training leaders from Rift Valley on understanding their role as community leaders, and also the role they can play to actually look at the natural resources in their community. So we'll be looking at it in diversity. Networking by agreeing on how do we take outcomes of this meeting to the next level, but also strengthen the capacity of the people you work with. Publication, yes, we'll be doing journals as well as voices, and also strengthening the youth and startups around that might come out of this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Juliet, do you want to say something?
Well, not really, because we are ready for lunch on the second floor, just as the previous days. And please don't forget to move your utensils to the hatch. We will come back at 1:30. No, yes, at 1:35 actually. We'll come back at 1:35 and kick off our panel roundtables. Thank you.
And if you haven't done so and you want to write a postcard to yourself that we can send to you in a few months, please do so and write into our visitor book of the exhibition.